Carroll County. My name is Bruce Bouch, and I'm the moderator this evening for the Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services Association County Commissioner Forum. Before us today, we have in alphabetical order Eric Boucher, Dennis Frazier, Paul Johnson, and Maria Warburton. Helping us today as our timekeeper is Elena Berry. And before we begin with everything, we do have a reading that is going to be presented by Mr. Don Fair. He is speaking on behalf of Steve Wentz, who is unable to attend this evening due to a prior engagement. Mr. Fair.
Good evening. Commissioner Wentz sent me this morning and asked that I would do him a favor of reading this. So the letter states, "Good evening to all who play a role in providing the critical need of public safety to our citizens and communities. In my mind, there is no greater calling than becoming an emergency responder in whatever role that finds you. From firefighters to emergency medical providers, support personnel, fundraising to cooks in the kitchen and everything in between, our volunteer fire departments play a crucial role in assuring our citizens they're protected every minute of every day. I have been a member of this most important community for over 42 years and continue to proudly serve. Over the last 4 years, I have done all I can to work with you, the Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services Association, and to maintain this essential piece of our county. My history as a volunteer firefighter and past officer of your association speaks for itself. There is no doubt that changes are on the horizon. Please know that I will continue my efforts over the next 4 years, relying heavily on my experience as we work together on the right decisions and direction, laying the framework of growth and development to ensure the history of this great tradition as it continues in Carroll County. It remains my obligation to make sure this happens. I applaud the officers and members of CCVESA for having this forum this evening and apologize for my absence, and I will view the forum. Safe regards, Commissioner Stephen Wentz." Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fair. Just a brief covering of the rules of the room. We do wish, of course, to make sure you do have your cell phones off or at least in vibrate mode. And the candidates will then be asked a question each, which they will have 2 minutes to respond. Prior to that, we've asked for a brief 2-minute introduction, and so I will start immediately to my left with Maria Warburton, if you'd like to introduce yourself and for your first 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Maria Warburton. I don't have anything specifically prepared for tonight, but I am the, for the introduction, but I'm the Democratic candidate for District 3. District 3 encompasses the city of Westminster and the surrounding area. I would like to first recognize those that might not be in attendance this evening because it is Yom Kippur, so there are people with their family or in a synagogue observing Yom Kippur. And I do think as leaders of this community, we do need to be aware of such holidays that might not be ones that many of us celebrate, but I know there was a municipal election just on September 10th, which was Rosh Hashanah, and the closing day of school was also a Muslim holiday, and kids had to miss their 8th grade ceremonies to attend services, or they chose to. So I think we do need to be more aware of that sort of thing as leaders in the community overall. Speaking of the community, I'm a 30-year resident of the community. I have 35 years experience in stormwater management, wastewater treatment, public drinking water, many other types of work that county personnel and as a county commissioner, I would be involved with. I have experience working with counties and states counties and towns across the state in negotiations for trying to deal with EPA mandates, working on how to best and efficiently implement those in ways that are cost effective to the communities. So I think I will bring a breadth of experience to the Board of Commissioners that is currently lacking in many different areas, one in gender, one in experience, one as a mom and a parent and a volunteer in the community. I think I'll just bring a lot of attributes to the board that are currently not there. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Paul Johnson, what do you have?
Hi, my name is Paul Johnson. I'm a first-time candidate running for Carroll County Commissioner in District 4. That encompasses Mount Airy all the way up to Union Bridge, New Windsor, Marston, Taylorsville, Winfield. I am running to focus District 4 representation on local issue zoning, and I have no personal agenda, and I will lead by example. My roots are in soil much like Carroll County. I grew up in lower, slower Eastern Shore working on farms until high school graduation, and I'm no stranger to hard work, and I thank my father for that, and I say that all the time, and I truly mean that. I have a bachelor's degree in information systems management from the University of Maryland, and I've had a successful 33-year career working in IT, and I'm still employed. For the past 19 years, I'm employed in Frederick, Maryland as a software engineer, like I just mentioned. My work experience has trained me how to take business objectives and turn them into efficient, cost-effective solutions. My wife and lifetime partner, Michelle, met on the Eastern Shore, and we've been married for 33 wonderful years. My family and I moved here to Mount Airy 20 years ago. We moved here to give our children the best public education we could find, and that is the truth. My kids went through public schools here, and they're now college graduates and with successful careers. Carroll served my family well, and I want to give back to the community by being your District 4 Commissioner. And I want to thank the CCVESA and the forum tonight for putting this on, and the Media Center for actually putting it for display. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, Dennis Frazier, what do you have for us?
Thank you, and nice tie.
Well, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Frazier. I am the current County Commissioner for District 3, and I'm running for re-election. Along with being the President of the Board of Commissioners, I'm also a part-time teacher for Carroll County Public Schools, and I coach wrestling for Gerstel Academy. I'm married to Debbie. We have 2 grown children, Christopher and Sarah. I believe public service is the measure of one's character. My public service includes being the past president of the Greens of Westminster HOA. I've been a member of the Tree Commission for the City of Westminster. I've been a member of the Parks Board for the city, also a Planning and Zoning Commissioner for Westminster, and a councilman for the city as well. I've also coached many youth basketball and wrestling teams. One of the planks of my platform last election was to develop solar fields in Carroll County to save the taxpayer money. We now have 3 solar fields that save taxpayers around $500,000 a year. And the installation and upkeep of these fields is absolutely free to the taxpayers, costs us nothing. I've also worked to keep county workers working in Carroll. The Board of Commissioners and myself have provided funding for every agency we fund to provide pay increases and improve working conditions for all their employees. This includes the Sheriff's Office, the school system, the community college, the nonprofits, as well as our own county workers. We have also set money aside to tackle the problem of recruiting and retaining volunteer firefighters. Although I know it's not enough, it is the first step. I would like to keep working for the citizens of Carroll County, and therefore I'm asking for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
And thank you. Now, if Eric Boucher would provide us his insight.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening. I'm Christopher Eric Boucher, Republican candidate for Commissioner in District 4. I'm a businessman of 25 years experience, and I have no experience whatsoever in emergency services. But what I do bring to the table for this organization is a sense of business, understanding of finances. I think it's critical for the next Board of Commissioners over the next 4 years to have to address the needs of emergency services and fulfill the obligations set in motion with the enabling legislation. Like I said, I'll admit that I'm a rookie with this field and this line of work, but I think the combination of business experience with this industry can help solve some of our problems, and we can reflect upon the success of Governor Hogan bringing his private sector business experience to our state government and being successful. So I, as a businessman, wish to apply the same principles locally and help out emergency services meet the shortcomings which we foresee in our near future to meet the demands placed upon them. Thank you.
Excellent. We will now move into the standard portion of the program. And as we picked on you first, I will move down the line here. So the first person up here is Paul Johnson. Okay. The first question being asked this evening, of which each of you will have 2 minutes to answer. Do you believe that the 14 fire companies are adequately funded in the budget?
No, I do not. But the real issue here is that we're not funded across all of our departments. So it's not just that the fire companies aren't being funded, it's every single department within the county. Until we get this straightened out, it's going to be this way for a while. I do not see anything in the near future based on what I've seen in the FY19 budget and through 24 where there's going to be additional funding coming to play. With that said, there's got to be economic development. We need to get that into the county in order to get the coffers up. If you look at ways to bring funds in, taxes, economic development, bringing in our citizens, if you look at those three options, one is definitely not something that anybody wants to see, and that's the taxes. So if we're going to get everybody funded up to speed, we've got to get economic development going. From what I understand and what I've heard, our economic developer or economic director has said that we're on the right course to do this. Thank you.
Excellent. Now, Dennis Frazier, your chance. Do you need me to read the question again?
No, I'm good, thank you. First, I'd like to say that the County Board of Commissioners doesn't actually fund the 14 different fire companies. We give our money to CCVESA, and they determine what to do with the money. This year, I believe we gave them right around $13 million. I think that the 14 fire companies, I think there needs to be a formula for how the 14 fire companies are funded. There has to be a base for each fire company because each fire company has to have the money for their firehouse and engines and so forth. That's no doubt. But there also should be some type of formulas going on how many runs you make, how many calls you make. If you look at the two companies out of the 14, Westminster and Sykesville, run over half the calls in Carroll County. Because of that, they probably should get some additional funding. I don't know what the formula should be, but there should be a formula so each fire company gets money according to what they do and how much they help out the county. And that's about it. Thank you.
And now, Eric Boucher, your shot at the question.
Well, like I emphasized earlier, I'm a businessman. It's important to point out for the people who are watching this that all 14 fire companies are individual corporations. So we have as a quasi private sector, public sector funding going on for the fire departments and emergency services. But to properly answer that question, as a businessman, you need to analyze all their budgets, all their payables, all their receivables, and analyze each one of them individually to properly answer that question. So it'd take a lot of analysis. If anything, it'd take maybe a smaller committee to dig into all the information and review it and analyze it. How much are the calls? Are there failures on the calls? There a lot has to be taken in consideration to answer that question. And in all honesty, standing here before you, I don't have that data. But as a businessman, I know that it's out there, and everyone in this system knows it's out there because the data capture system we have can be properly utilized to figure out how to fund those different companies. Thank you.
And for you, Maria, your turn.
Sure. So admittedly, I am a layperson when it comes to a lot of things with the volunteer fire companies. I did go online trying to research some of this in preparation for tonight, and I was unable to find the budget online of any of the fire companies, of the 14 fire companies. Perhaps they're there, but if so, I didn't find them. So as far as are they adequately funded by the county budget, as Commissioner Frazier said, there is money that's given to the Carroll County, Carroll Volunteer Emergency Services Association, VESA, and my understanding was it was $8.7 million this year, but perhaps it was more. And then the county relies on that professional agency to decide how the money should be divvied up between the different fire companies. I know that the county budget was increased the last couple years at VESA's request to pay for some of the self-contained breathing apparatus units. But as far as what percentage of the overall budget of each fire company, I wasn't able to discover what that amount is. I do feel like for years out, the current Board of Commissioners hasn't done anything to put money into the budget in preparation for perhaps more paid personnel that may come about because of the more career personnel, because of the enabling legislation. So I do think down the road, funding issues in the budget may be a concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dennis Frazier, you get the first question offered in this round, and that is, when it comes to public safety, should police, fire, rescue, and EMS be funded equally?
Equally, no, but fairly, yes. They need the money, and whatever money that they need to properly help the citizens of Carroll County. If we need more money in fire and EMS, then we should have more money in fire and EMS. No one's going to move into the county, and we do want more people to move into the county, if they believe that if something happens to their house, the fire department won't get out there in time to put out the fire. If they have an emergency somewhere, if they don't believe someone's going to be there and EMS is going to come to help that person out, no one's going to move in if we have problems like that. So we do need to fund these agencies fairly, but equally, no, they're different sizes and so forth, so no, not equally, but fairly. They need the money, an adequate amount of money, is what they need to get their jobs done. And someone earlier mentioned economic development and the tight budgets. Our budget is very, very tight right now. I'm hoping that economic development increases, as it has in the past 4 years. We've added, I think, a bit over 1,300 new jobs, and we've had $332 million of investment into our infrastructure from businesses in the county. We need that to continue, because the more businesses that come in, the more money we have to use for services like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Boucher.
Equally funded. You know, I'd like to answer that question with a question of why. They have different departments, they have different responsibilities. There's a lot of economic indicators and factors that go into pay. There's education, there's skill, there's hazard as far as this trade is concerned, and there's the competitiveness in the region. What is the market demanding for individuals to work in those different departments? So, as Commissioner Frazier had stated, be fair. Yes, we're going to be fair and should be fair, but equally paid, like everyone getting the same amount, no, I thoroughly disagree with that. But those who deserve it should get more. But that would go through analyzation of what's out there in the market. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria, your turn at this question.
Yeah, I had a similar question, I guess, about what equally meant, because especially when it comes to the fire companies, I think most or all of them want to keep their autonomy of having some of their own funding and relying on some county money, but also their own money, so they have some autonomy. Historically, that's been the case, and even as we potentially move towards more career firefighters, I think most want to keep the option of having volunteers. So I don't think it should necessarily be equal. It should be adequate, but not necessarily equal when it comes to the amount given by the county budget. Speaking of career versus volunteer, I mean, I do hope going forward there is that opportunity for volunteer firefighters to still maintain a large voice in the fire companies. I know in some of the counties that's been an issue, that the career people with the union and the volunteers, there's an issue on, can the volunteers still put in as many hours as they did once there's career firefighters. So I hope that even moving forward that that's an option and that funding does come from the companies themselves as well as the county budget.
Thank you. Paul Johnson, your turn.
Yeah, I had the same reaction when I read this question. So I tried to read into it a little bit, thinking that it really wasn't that you were looking for like a perfect split and that you were going to get a certain percentage of a big pot of money. So my thinking was every single one of our departments are going to have different needs per year, per budget cycle. So same thing that's going to happen every year during a budget we created and to be put forth. Some years your needs are going to be more, some less, and it's going to have to be balanced out by the commissioners. That's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to question number 3, and we'll start with Eric Boucher. Some companies are in need for paid engine drivers 24/7. Is this something you would support on as needed request?
Yes, I think that all falls down upon the data collection system that you all use in emergency services. to analyze what the call loads are there failures. We can very clearly analyze the need and determine whether those departments need those drivers or not and get them the adequate drivers needed for the community. I feel that no matter what part of the county you live in, whether it's Harney or Mount Airy, you should have the same quality emergency services that someone else in the county has. And it should be fair with the amount of emergency services people can receive, especially now with the aging population we have in the county, putting a higher demand on our resources. So yes, I would support that.
Thank you. Maria Warburton.
Yes, I would certainly support helping to fund those positions. I don't know exactly how that method would look. I mean, currently, the paid career personnel are not county employees. They're hired by each fire company. So the request generally for funding comes from the overall organization, not from the individual fire companies. So that funding needs to go through, the clearinghouse, so to speak, unless procedures change through, the task force that's currently meeting. But certainly, I'd support that if a request came in. Like I said, I don't know how that would look because it's not the individual fire companies requesting that currently. But whatever method it would take, I would hope that the county could maintain 24/7 coverage in all the fire companies, all the stations.
Thank you. Paul Johnson, your turn.
My assumption on this is that once this is implemented, that a certain proportion of the fundraising will come to the county to help fund the EMS departments. So yes, I do think that some of the fundraising money will be used to help pay for this. As I understand, the Emergency Services Council that's being put together is going to come up with recommendations on how this is to be done. And I have not seen that yet. I wish I had before this so I could be a little more educated on what's going on. But I do think that we are going to need to use the funds, some funds, a small portion of it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Dennis Frazier.
The short answer is yes. I think that if we need to pay for drivers, and we have to pay for drivers, we have to have the service out there. I believe Westminster already has paid drivers 24/7, and I'm not sure Sykesville, but I heard Sykesville had them as well. Those are, again, as I mentioned, the two companies that have the most runs, so it makes sense for it to have them. If other companies need paid drivers, then we should have the money out there to support that as well. Because, it's not just anyone can drive the fire truck. It does take it's not just my license, I can't go out and do that. So you need a specialized skill. So, and if you're going to have someone there, and you do, then you have to pay them to stay there. Because if a call comes in, the truck has to go out. As simple as that. So we do need to do that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now, Maria Warburton, we'll begin with you for question number 4. Should the 14 corporations have to use their fundraising money to help pay for personnel?
So again, I was unable to look up the budgets of the current fire companies, so honestly, I'm not exactly clear on if any money is currently used to pay personnel. My assumption is that it is, but because, again, the money comes through Visa to the companies. Ideally, they shouldn't have to. Ideally, the fundraising should be for keeping up maintenance of the fire station, for new apparatus, that sort of thing. And that the paid personnel would be paid, perhaps, county employees at some point. They would be made county employees, I think would be the best option going forward at some point. But currently, I believe that is the situation, and short term, I would say that that's the way it would remain until some sort of decision is made on how something, the future career firefighters, what kind of setup that would look like. Again, I would rely on the professionals, the experts to decide on what that should look like. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on what that should look like. I believe in relying on the people in the field, the people that have been in the business for decades.
Thank you. Paul Johnson.
Well, I answered the wrong question last time. Thank you, Marie. I do think that part of the fundraising is going to have to come to the county to help, but actually all of the firefighters that come underneath the county not control, but under the county, and they'll be paid by the county. So those funds will come from the county. Whether a portion of that comes out of the fundraising is a different story, and I have not seen anything yet how that's going to be implemented or what the plan is for that.
Thank you. Dennis Frazier.
Well, the short answer is no, I don't think they should have to use their fundraising money to help pay for personnel. Currently, the county pays or gives CCVESA money to give to the fire companies for EMS personnel and drivers. The drivers that we give the money for 13 of the 14, because one of them doesn't have the money for either one of those, but 13 of the 14 companies, we give them the money, but they determine when the driver is going. We give them money for an 8-hour shift. Now, that could be from 9 to 5, or if they have plenty of people there, they could schedule it later. But I do not believe that their fundraising should have to pay for the personnel that are needed in the station. And yes, that means that we have to kick up some more money for that. But that also means we need some more money coming in. So when those things equalize out, we're there for you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Eric Boucher.
Well, as long as there are 14 individual corporations and the financial situation of the county demands it, it's all have to take place. So yes, they need to use those funds for that resource. I'd like to emphasize what Commissioner Frazier said earlier about economic development. We got a tight budget in this county, and the only solution to that is to expand their economy and capture some revenue through economic expansion and address all these financial issues which we're presently answering here tonight, because ultimately what it comes down to is money. So as long as the situation demands that those funds will come from the fire department's fundraising, then so be it, with the ultimate objective through the enabling legislation to get us to a position where we're not in that situation anymore. But for now, it's all have to take place. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, we will be moving on to question number 5, and this will begin with Paul Johnson. Related to the new enabling legislation, are you in support of the county to start funding of the paid chief in this year's budget?
No, I'm not in support of that for this year's budget. The FY19's budget is done. It's been approved, and it's already cut to the bone. We're running pretty lean. First thing we'll need is to actually get a budget in place and submitted to the county before this could even take place. I would assume that there's staffing needs beyond just the chief himself. So there's logistics and other things that would have to be in place. So before you can actually implement something like this, you would need to actually get it approved and adopted by the commissioners, and that would require a budget.
Thank you. Dennis Frazier.
What question are we on again? Sorry.
It's the 5th one. It's
Maybe legislation.
related.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. No, I don't think we're ready to take that step yet. The enabling legislation is a tool that the county can use for when we need to use it. We put it in place now, so we're ready to go when it's needed. We're trying to, as much as we can, help keep volunteers in and keep the volunteer firefighters going here. So we put additional money in this year, $300,000 into that for retention and recruitment of volunteer firefighters. We're trying to keep the volunteer force going for as long as we can. And to be very frank, until all 14 of the fire companies agree, I'm not in favor of putting a chief in charge of it. I don't think that's the step until all 14 agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Boucher.
I'd like to thank Mr. Johnson for making the observation that it would be the fiscal year 20 budget since the 19's already set. Ultimately, I think any organization should have a chief executive officer. So this position would basically be the chief executive officer of the fire departments. But like Commissioner Frazier mentioned, this is in the future. This is long-term, something that's evolving. But ultimately, I believe we need to be in a position financially in the future with economic growth where we can have a chief of the fire departments and create an organizational structure that encompasses all the departments. but it's going to be an incremental process. Whether that chief would be hired in 20 budget, I don't know. I haven't seen the numbers. I said we have a lot to learn once we get elected as rookies to digest a lot of information. So that would be determined in the future, but ultimately I believe that is an objective to achieve, to have an organization countywide. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria Warburton, your chances.
Thank you. I also assumed it meant by this year's budget, making a change in the current FY19 budget, which I would not be in favor of. If by this year's budget you mean the FY20, which would be debated come March and April, I still would have to, see what the information is, and if things are really in place to make that decision at that time. Would this person be a county employee? Would it be a employee of Visa? Would it be some sort of hybrid contract position? And what would the organization look like that the police chief would be working on? What kind of projects, what kind of structure would the police chief be expected to be implementing? Would it be working with all 14 companies to come up with, operations that are similar? I know that in looking at all the different websites, each fire company has very distinct strategies on how they advertise things. Some of them advertise for volunteers very well. Others, you really have to find the information. So I think a police chief could be helpful in making things uniform in those type of activities among the different fire stations. But I'd have to know exactly what the police chief's role is going to be before encouraging that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to question number 6. This will go to, let's see, where did I start? Okay, Dennis Frazier, you get the first shot at question number 6. And that is, do you believe that the county may have to create a public safety tax to help fund needed services?
No, I'm not in favor of it. I don't believe we're going to need it, and I'm not in favor of it anyway. We don't have a separate tax for driving on the roads. We don't have a separate tax for trash pickup. We don't have a separate tax for other services that are needed by citizens here in Carroll County. This should come out of the general fund, like everything else, all the other services. That's what the tax dollars are for. A separate tax for this, I don't think is needed. I do think we need more money, but I don't think we need to do it by a separate tax. And again, I'll go back to economic development. And additionally, I would like to also think that, and we're not sure, but we're going to get additional funding this year because of the way the taxes, the Trump tax plan, let's call it that, has come out. I think the state will get hundreds of millions of dollars more, and that should give us $3 to $4 million more. And I do believe that that money is going to come through because, in my opinion, if the state legislator wanted to fix that, they could have fixed it with a one bill. They didn't. Therefore, I think they want that money to keep coming into them, and therefore we will get additional money into the county. And with that additional money, we can do the things that we need to do. But a separate tax, no, I'm not in favor of it. Thank you.
Eric Boucher.
I am in unison with Commissioner Frazier's position. As Republicans, we're thoroughly against increasing or creating new taxes. We believe they have negative economic impact upon our local economy, and that the true solution to this problem we're facing with finances is economic expansion. And that's all come through business development within our county. I'd like to see the expansion of economic development in businesses because we reap so much profitability off of property tax on industry, and we reap so much profit off the income tax by expanding the income of our citizens by creating economic wealth. So we don't need to go the path of creating a new tax. I'm totally against that. So the answer is no.
Thank you. Maria Warburton.
First, I just want to say, I think on the last answer, I was saying police chief a couple of times instead of fire chief. I hope you all understood what I meant. Sorry about that. It just kind of hit me. But as far as the public safety tax, I would be against that. If something is important enough, as the fire safety of the community is, it should be part of the operating budget. It shouldn't be an add-on. For one thing, even if you do create a separate tax, as they say, money is fungible, which means money can be played around with and moved around, just like the educational fund, the money that from casinos that was supposed to go strictly into the education fund. That money went in, but then money came out. So you can create a tax, but it means nothing because then the money you would have had just goes somewhere else anyway and the budget gets bigger. So no, I'm not in favor of a tax. One thing potentially that could be done would be something similar to the stormwater fee. The commissioners like to say that they got rid of the rain tax. They really didn't. A stormwater fee is inside the, if you look at your property tax bill, there's a watershed and restoration fee that everyone's charged, a certain percentage of your property tax. So there could be some sort of thing like that where there's a dedicated funding source from a tax that's already coming in to make sure that that is adequately funded in years out. That's what the state mandated for the stormwater, was that a dedicated funding source be set up. So perhaps something like that could be done. But no, not a new separate tax, especially for something this important that should be in the operating budget.
Thank you. Paul Johnson.
I can't look you in the eye and actually say that, yes, I am in support of the tax increase. To me, if something like that was to come up and be looked into, I think it would need to be a referendum put to the public, and they would have to vote on that. So any kind of tax increase or new tax like this is not something for us as commissioners to decide on. I do think it's critically important that we get the citizens on board for any kind of tax increase, and that's why I put that out there. Everybody's talking about economic development, and economic development has grown in the county, and I'm really proud of that. But we're still so severely underfunded right now in all other areas. So when is this windfall going to start coming through that we've been hearing about for the past 16 months? Until that hits Carroll County, I think things are going to remain tight. And at some point, I think you may be revisiting this question again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we go to Eric Boucher for the last on the list. I was presented another question from the audience that I'll give you the opportunity with as well. But Eric, would you be in favor, as a commissioner, supporting a committee for charter government?
I was pleasantly surprised to see this question on this list, considering this is for emergency medical services. Excuse me. But I was very happy to see it there, and the fact that I'm probably the most passionate, strongest advocate of Carroll County obtaining its independence and having its own local government with a separately elected executive and legislature. It is paramount that this county move in that direction and obtain its independence. I tell people a successful corporation is ran by a board of directors that sets the policy and determines the allocation of resources, and they hand it off to a chief executive to execute their policy. And it's so important to have that natural tension in our political science. It is the greatness of our Constitution. Our federal government has a president and a Congress. Our state government has a governor and a General Assembly. We have a commissioner board. Well, what's a commissioner board? Does anyone here know the origination of the commissioner board? It's from British colonial rule. We are still operating under what I call a dysfunctional system of government that we have carried on and inherited from British colonial rule. And it's so important that we eliminate it and obtain our independence. I'm determined, if possible, to make this the last commissioner board in the history of Carroll County, and I intend on doing everything I can to make that happen so that we will have a separate system of government where we elect our legislatures as county councilmen and a county executive to run and administer public affairs. That gives our citizens 2 county votes, one locally for their councilman and one countywide for their executive. And I think our county will be much more efficiently run under that system of government. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Maria Warburton.
This isn't an issue I'm necessarily running on, but I would support having a committee look into the facts surrounding charter government. I know it's been voted on in the past and hasn't gone through, but the last time it was when we came to this 5-commissioner board. So there was 2 different votes, and it kind of got diluted. The 5 commissioners got added on as the ballot kind of as a last-minute thing, and that's what went through. I don't agree with the claim that charter government would necessarily be more expensive. If you look at the cost of Carroll's Commissioners Board, currently, 5 commissioners each earn $45,000 a year. They have approved a budget increase in 2020 for that salary to go up to $51,000 a year. So that's $51,000 times 5 people plus benefits for each of them, benefits that go for a lifetime potentially at a package that's better than county employees. If you look just next door at Frederick County, which recently went to the charter form of government, the county executive makes $95,000 a year, and they have 7 council people, not necessarily all councilmen, that earn $22,000 a year with no benefits. So that is less than what our 5 board commissioners will cost in 4 years from now. And again, you would have representation both at the local level and then county-wide. And you can set up charter government in many different ways. Frederick County chose to set it up where the council people actually has more power than in some of the other counties, where they have more say in planning decisions and that sort of thing. So it's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to charter government. So I would be in favor of a committee researching it.
Thank you. Paul Johnson.
Yes, I would be in favor of a committee being put together to actually look into charter government. I like charter government, and actually in the last forum I said that I liked the current 5 commissioners, and I still do. Why I said that back then, and I still feel this way, is it has given me a chance to actually run for government. It's not saying that not having to go across the whole county to be able to meet everybody is very difficult, but within my district, I have met quite a few constituents, and I think it has allowed me to do that. And I like having the 5 commissioners balance things out, but I would support a commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Frazier.
Sure. Before I get to that question, I want to clarify something that was mentioned earlier about a rain tax. There is no rain tax on your county bill. It's not there. There's a flush tax on your county bill that was put in by Martin O'Malley when he was governor. There's no rain tax. But to answer this question, yes, I'm in favor of a committee to write a charter. I pushed for it this term, and I'll be pushing for it again. Looks like I have an advocate on this side. So we'll see where that goes, but I do think it's a way that this county needs to move forward. If you look at the county as a business, we basically have a $500 million business. Can you think of any other $500 million business that doesn't have a chief executive? I can't think of any. So in the current form, we have 5 people that run the county. One really good president, but you have 5 people that run the county. And so 3 of the 5 have to agree on something before anything happens. It's not really a fast-moving form of government. It's not as responsive as it could be. If a business calls a county and they want a response right now and decide whether they're going to come to Carroll County or move to Howard County or Baltimore County, and they want a county executive or they want someone, elected official, to call them back with an answer, we have to get on the phone or email and get at least 3 people to come together before we can give an answer. Howard County, Baltimore County, the county executive calls right back. And the businesses will say, and they do say, well, if it took me 2 days to get an answer from Carroll County and I'm trying to move a business there, why would I come? Because once I'm there, they're not even going to be that responsive. So yes, I'm in favor of having a committee to look at charter. Charter is not necessarily more expensive. It's not necessarily another layer of government. It all depends on how the charter is written. So let's write a charter and then see, and then vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I do have one question that's brought before us from a member in our audience. It's not fire and service related, but it is a public safety venue. So I'll read it, and then I'll pass it to you so you can each have it in front of you as he comes down through. So one of the drawbacks of Carroll County is that it's very dangerous to walk to places, even if the distances aren't far. It's also difficult to get around using public transportation if you don't have a car. What are your thoughts on making the county pedestrian and public transportation friendly?
as far as making the county pedestrian-friendly, I don't know what exactly that would look like because there are areas so spread out. I think work could be done to make the different towns pedestrian-friendly with better crosswalks, better lighting perhaps. At some of the crosswalks have flashing lights or something. Many people ignore the crosswalks. Many people just don't take into account pedestrians. I agree. It's a car county, and cars king here, and that's not going to change, I don't think. But I think that different towns maybe could form a task force to look into ideas that different counties have. Hire one consultant, perhaps, if there's issues, and work on something together rather than each municipality doing stuff separately. The county doesn't control a lot of what goes on in the towns. They're municipalities that have their own government. So it would have to take some sort of, cooperation between the towns and the county to work those out. As far as public transportation, I know that some additional routes have been added, but it is very difficult if you work at night, if you work on weekends, or try to get to the college from outlying areas. It can be difficult, and I would want to research those routes again and see what can be done to improve them. It's not ideal what we have now. I agree, but I must admit I'm not intimately familiar with the routes, but I would certainly be in favor of looking at them and adding more or changing the times and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Paul Johnson, same question.
We live in a very rural area, and to think that we can actually get walkways into all those areas would be very difficult and within the county itself. And the municipalities, I agree, they already have put a lot of effort into doing that. I know Mount Airy is working on this. I've walked quite a few neighborhoods that I think are pretty well paved in that area. Looking up through Union Bridge and New Windsor, trying to think of how that would affect a place like Winfield. Where would something like that be put into play? I think it would cost quite a bit of money to get it with very little benefit for that area. I would rather see more something like bike paths and put alongside the roads, but again, that's also quite expensive. And again, transit. I know we've cut back on the transit and that they've recently implemented some new routes and had a few more buses put into play. Maybe that should be looked into again and see if we can enhance those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Frazier.
I do believe that we need more bicycle paths, more walking paths. I would like to, and I've talked about putting sidewalks within a mile of any school, so students could walk back and forth to school within 1 mile, because if you're closer to school, sometimes the buses aren't there. I don't know what the distance is for the school for the bus to pick you up, but within 1 mile of any school, you should be able to walk safely back and forth to that school. When I became commissioner, I pulled out of the mothballs the countywide pedestrian and bicycle plan that was done started 10 or 12 years ago. We pulled it out, we're looking at it. We're trying to make it so you can get around the county without using your car. Or another thing we're looking into is complete streets. Complete streets means that there's a lane for cars, there's a lane for bikes, and there's somewhere a lane for people to walk. Now, is that going to be all around the county? Maybe eventually, but not right now, because again, we are very spread out. But like I said, you start around where the schools are, you spread out from there. As far as bus routes, the TAC, the master plan for the buses, we're looking at right now, and what's in the TAC is to extend the hours for the buses from 6 in the morning to 6:30 in the evening. That way, if you need to go to work by a bus, you could get there, finish your job, and go home with the bus. Right now, you can't do both. You can do one or the other, depends on what time your job started. But if you went from 6 to 6:30, we could do that. We do need more buses. We just got an influx of 16 buses this year, but you have to remember, for the past, I think it was 5 years before that, we got no buses. So when the 16 buses came, other buses that were really old and need to be retired were retired. So it wasn't like 16 new buses. My time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Boucher, your chance at this
I
question.
think the other three candidates gave excellent responses to this question. It is one that I have heard nothing from my constituency about, but I'm open to listen, considering the things the other candidates have said. I believe that most of my constituents need to ride a Uber. So Uber's a good capitalist source. It's cheaper to Uber, and it's less expensive for a county than to create a fleet of buses and maintain them. I've even once heard the board talk about possibly subsidizing Uber for elderly citizens that need services instead of running buses. Anytime we could incorporate some private sector enterprise that would be cheaper than maintaining the public sector, I support that. But I'm very open to taking into consideration the concerns if my constituents bring them up, or concerns that are brought to my attention by other constituents who have a much higher density population, such as Commissioner Frazier. His constituency's demands for public transportation are far different than mine. I live in Woodbine. I'm in a very rural community, and most of my voter base are rural citizens. So it's not an issue I'm very much concerned with, but I will consider it as it's brought up and brought to my attention. Thank you.
Excellent. I thank all of our panel for your insight and your answers to the questions this evening. At this time, I do wish to offer you the opportunity for a 2-minute closing statement per. What? Oh. Okay. Well, we have a question here.
Rick Baker, past president of VESA, and also past president down at Volunteer Fire Company. There's been several references about when we were talking about making, how to make up the money to pay for county employees in district and fire rescue services. There's some responses that include the words fundraising would have to come into that money to help make up it. When the candidates said fundraising, did you mean EMS billing, or were you talking about money coming from carnivals, dinners, crab feeds, those type of things to help make up payroll?
Start with-
We want to run down through the hearing. Maria?
Well, my understanding of the,
Fundraising, I guess, is what I'm asking.
well, my understanding of the question was I thought they meant like current personnel. But no, I don't think if the county goes to a more career firefighter look with county employees, no, I don't think county employees' salaries should be paid for through fundraising of any kind. They're county employees just like any other county employee, and that should come out of the budget. I was referring to the way the current setup is, where each station is a separate company, each station's a separate corporation, and so that money all is one pot, and then it gets paid out. And I don't think there's to my knowledge, there's not a differentiation made between what's paid for through fundraisers and what's paid for through Visa or what's paid for through a grant or something. But no, if they're county employees, I don't think that should be through fundraisers.
I think that was pretty much geared towards what I had said earlier. And once we get our combined service in place where they become county employees, the county will pay those employees, and they'll be responsible. As I understand, or as I thought I understood, that some of the money from each one of the fire companies will come to the county to help offset some of this cost. That's what I was referring to. Whether that money is coming from fundraising or it's coming from ambulance services, I am not privy to that. So, but once this does get implemented, the commission or the county will be responsible for paying them.
Thank you. Dennis Frazier.
I don't think any fundraising should be used to pay for personnel for the fire departments. I don't think it should be. Fundraising should be used for other purposes for the fire departments. You have plenty of other things to use money for. There's money needed for. I'm hoping that we're years and years and years away from paid staff. We do have some now, and the ones that we have now should be paid for from the county. If we need additional, like we need to put 24/7 drivers at all the stations, they should be paid for from the county, not through fundraising.
And Eric Boucher.
I agree with what Commissioner Frazier said. We're not there yet, but we need to be at a point where our emergency services personnel serving 24/7, willing to sacrifice their lives to run into burning buildings. We as a community should collectively support them and pay for them. That is the ultimate objective, but we're not presently there at this moment, but we'd like to get there. It's too important of a responsibility and an obligation. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I have great respect for emergency medical people. You know, I wouldn't run into a burning building. I'd pass out the my own blood. But people one day saved my life. I am a survivor of emergency medical technicians saving my life after a violent home invasion. I got a helicopter ride. I don't remember it, but I got one. But it's so vitally important. And I take this issue very personally because I survived an incident and I was laying in a puddle of blood bleeding. I prayed that someone would save my life. And sure enough, EMTs in Baltimore County saved my life. So I'm forever indebted. And I want this community to know that I'm there for you, and I want to do everything I can in the future to help make this happen, where it's not such a hassle for all 14 of these corporations to struggle to get volunteers, to maintain them, to put them in service, not lose them to other counties. This is a very complex issue, and it's going to consume a lot of the next board's time, but I think we should incrementally be able to tackle it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Actually,
Oh.
anyone who in the audience would like to have a question, can we actually come to the podium?
Oh,
I know it's a
okay.
hassle, but people at home would like to hear what you have to say.
You repeat it.
Okay.
Or you could repeat it, maybe? Or you could repeat it? You could repeat it.
My name's Gene Kerfman, and my question's not directly related to the public service. I've heard all of you talk about industrial development. I worked for the county for 31 years. Been retired for 14. I've heard economic development ever since I went to work for the county. We still have not gotten a large amount of economic development. I can tell you one of the main reasons. Do you know it? What's all the counties surrounding Carroll County have that Carroll County doesn't have?
An interstate.
You just named it. Big companies want to have an easy way to get their supplies in,
Trucking.
get their product out, get their employees in, get their employees out. How are you going to address that?
Who's up first?
Well, we picked on Marie the first time, so we'll start with Paul.
If I answer that question, I will have South Carroll all over me. There was a big push 8 years ago with this exact issue to keep that area rural. And that is one of the touching points where we do hit 270. We have some property in South Carroll and Mount Airy that would be good for this, and it's going to have to be looked into. It's going to take infrastructure. It's going to take working with the state to get the roads expanded. There is farmland around that area, but then when you get talking about farmland and using it for this type of purpose, people in Carroll get very upset. So I'm being right up front about it. It's going to be tough. And that's why I mentioned earlier about economic development. I keep hearing that we're growing and growing and growing in this area. Well, where? I mean, I know we have funds. I've heard it. But this budget for the next, out to 2024, is so tight. I don't know where things are going to go. It's going to be, the next Board of Commissioners is going to have it really tough. Thank you.
Dennis Frazier.
A couple things about roads. First, you have to look back a little bit, and I don't want to keep going to O'Malley, but if you go back to Martin O'Malley, he put his foot on the throat of Carroll County, and he would not give any money to expand any of the 140 or 32, 27, 26, none of that, because the state at that time wanted Carroll County to take mass transit from the city and run it out. So what they said is, if they're not taking that mass transit, we're not giving them any money to develop those particular roads, which are state roads. When I first became county commissioner, there's a 6-year book from the state about their projects. Carroll County had not one project in that 6-year book. Now we have some. Now we have a friendly administration in Annapolis. They're working very well with us. They know our priorities and our concerns are some of the major roads I just mentioned, and they're working with us. But again, it's a 6-year book. We had nothing in it before, so you can imagine it's going to take a few years for some of our major projects to get up there. But if you look at the work being done along 97 now, that wasn't even talked about when this Board of Commissioners first came in, something we brought up. 97 is being improved. We're looking at 32 now, going across from Howard County over to 26. We're looking at that. They're developing a plan of what to do with that right now. That wasn't even being looked at back then. So we're working with the administration down in Annapolis for the funding to get some of these projects done. It's a slow process, but it is moving forward.
Thank you. Eric Boucher.
We mentioned this earlier, going to charter government. The biggest impediment we have is a lack of a chief executive. Someone has to set the vision for the county with the input of its citizens. And with that vision, you chart the course of where you want to be. We lack that. And as far as industrial development, it's not just industrial development we need. Parts of it, components of the development, yes, but there's also business development as far as professional buildings, commercial buildings. It is not just industry we need, but development of business across the board of all sectors. One of the biggest driving factors in the economy is a small businessman. I'm a small businessman. It's not necessarily bringing in giant corporations that are running lots of trucks in and out of our community. It's about small business development. And when you have small business people, their individual income goes up. We need to capture the expansion of both our individual income tax and expansion of our property tax without raising the rates. So fostering a good, positive environment for businesses creates small business people. And that's the business expansion we would also need outside of industrial expansion.
Thank you very much. Maria Wilburton.
I agree that the roads are an issue. My 2 kids, who are now in their 20s, played travel soccer, and we'd say it took at least an hour to get to anywhere that they were playing from Carroll County. So it's at least an hour to get to pretty much anywhere. So one thing, though, is about 45% or more of people in Carroll that are employed commute outside of Carroll County to work. And so if you could bring in companies that take advantage of the existing workforce instead of them driving elsewhere, I think that could be an option. Now, another limiting factor in some of the areas is water. It's not just the roads, it's water. Westminster has very limited water. They're working with the Department of the Environment now, where I worked for 33 years to help with that. I worked in stormwater and public drinking water areas. So that is an area that perhaps we could improve. I did do a tour about a month ago of the Warfield complex down in the Sykesville area, and there are some plans there for some small office spaces and what's called like incubator areas where someone can come and work there remotely for another company. They were saying that they're just within the mileage requirement for Fort Meade, so people where they allow contractors to work in case they have to get down to Fort Meade for the day, but there's lots of folks in Carroll County already employed by Fort Meade. Perhaps they could work at the Warfield complex, and then they're working locally. That gives them more time in the evening to participate in community affairs, including the fire companies. Right now, when you're commuting an hour and a half each way, you don't have time in the evening to volunteer. So the Warfield complex seems like it's promising. Some other areas may be promising to take advantage of the current people commuting out of the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional questions? I thank our audience. I'd like to go to closing statements, and might as well keep the roll going. So, Dennis Frazier, you would be the next one to receive a question, so we'll go with the closing statement from you, sir.
Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight and for watching us on TV. I do appreciate it. When you go to vote, on June the 6th, I'd like you to think about the progress the county has made in the last 4 years and vote accordingly. We have added 1,300 new jobs in Carroll County in the past 4 years. Businesses have put in $332 million of infrastructure in Carroll County in the last 4 years. We have 3 new solar fields in Carroll County, saving taxpayers in Carroll County over $500,000 a year. It didn't cost us anything to put them in, doesn't cost us anything to maintain them. We're looking to put another 21 acres of solar fields in Carroll County right now. So I would hope by the end of my second term, we will be saving the taxpayers millions of dollars a year. We are the safest county in the state of Maryland. That's not just by accident. That has to do with our police, our fire, and our EMS all coming together and working in Carroll County. Think of those things when you go to the polls on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Boucher.
Well, I like to tell people what makes this county great is its citizens, its parents. We have great schools and low crime because we have parents that care about their children. They ensure that they go to school, that they're well behaved. And that manifests itself up through our society and how our culture is with less crime, as Commissioner Frazier mentioned. So no matter what the government does, it can't change that. That's a responsibility of the citizens, that we make this county great. So I want to bring my experience as a businessman to foster and encourage the perpetuation of that environment. We got something good here. Let's continue with it. And as a businessman, I look at things as being inefficient. I want to make them more efficient. Because if things are more efficient, we save money. And what's the problem we all face here with these questions is money. We need to properly run our county like a business. And we run a tight budget, but I'm sure if we went through it as a businessman approach will and expand our economy, we can make up the shortcomings. I have a good working relationship, or establishing a good working relationship with Commissioners Frazier, Wance, and Weaver, all wonderful men, and I think I'll get along very well with them on the board. I'm presently establishing a very good relationship with the Republican nominee, Ed Rothstein, in the Freedom area. Great guy, retired colonel. He's going to bring his experience to the table. And I think between potential Commissioner Rothschild and myself, we're going to have a very strong, good working relationship representing South Carroll on the board. And we should do very well with the existing 3 members of the board if all of them get elected. And I think we have a very good future. I feel very bright and positive with President Trump expanding our economy, Governor Hogan doing wonderful things for us. We no longer have an adversary in the governor's mansion. So I want everyone to remember Christopher Eric Boucher for Commissioner in District 4. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Maria Warburton.
And again, thank you to all that came out tonight or that might be watching live at home or watching at another time in the future. Voting is one of our greatest responsibilities. So on November 6th, although I obviously, if you live in District 3, I ask for your vote. The most important thing is to get out and vote. In addition to the commissioners, there are some important ballot questions, including the Save the Education Fund, as I mentioned earlier. That casino money was supposed to go to education. It's going in, but other money's coming out. It needs to be a dedicated source. So if you're an advocate of education, which everyone should be, no matter your age, no matter if you have kids, good schools, make good economy, makes a good living environment for everyone, vote for that, vote yes on that ballot question. As far as the Board of Commissioners, I think I'll bring a fresh perspective. I'll certainly bring some diversity to the board. I'm the only woman running out of all 5 districts, so I think some diversity is in order. I also will bring experience that's not there. As mentioned, I have experience at the local government level in stormwater management, which we certainly have seen the need for the last few weeks of the summer. I have drinking water experience, and more importantly, I have experience working with towns and counties all across the state, collaborating on issues. I find it unfathomable that North Carroll High School was closed with this grandiose idea of putting in the Sheriff's Department and the Board of Ed without realizing that the zoning needed to change. And it all fell apart, and we're paying $50,000 a month upkeep on that. The same thing with the town of New Windsor. There was supposed to be an experimental new pay-as-you-throw system, And that fell apart at the last minute. Collaboration is needed. I know how to do that. I know how to cooperate with people across the aisle. And again, I ask for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
And thank you. Paul Johnson, for your wrap-up.
Thank you all for coming tonight, and I really appreciate it. I'm new to all this also, as Eric Boucher said, and still have a lot to learn, and I am a good study, and I apologize. I don't think I was as prepared as I should have been tonight, so I will be right up front and honest about that. I was going to read my statement here, but I want to actually bring up a few observations I've had through the county. I've hit quite a few doors through the county, about 1,400. I'm really hitting the doors, and I'm knocking on doors. In a country that's so divided, we've got to start coming together locally. I mean that from my heart. And I'll tell you, the one theme that I have seen knocking on doors is people have very limited concerns that are not at the political level. Those that asked me if I was a Democrat did not turn me away. Very few people that I ran into through the county were like, no, I don't want to talk with you. They talk with me. As a matter of fact, some of my most engaging conversations that I've had have been with Republicans. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I have got a chance. I know that I'm ranting here about some different stuff, but I really want you to know there's some great people in this county. And I think they're really looking for strong leadership in this county. And I think that they're tired of the partisanship. And if anything comes out of this campaign, whether I win or lose, I have enjoyed that aspect of it. Thank you.
Thank you. This now concludes the Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services Association County Commissioner Forum. We do thank all our attendees for answering the questions, and of course our audience in the building and online as well for your viewing pleasure. So thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.